Welcome to Saints on Cinema. I'm Tim Wilde, and with me tonight is Kirsten, and we've missed her on the show, but she's back to talk about one of her favorite subjects, which is...
Star Trek!
That's right.
Next Generation.
That's right. So I, just really quickly, I enjoy Star Trek. I'm more of a Star Wars fan, but I, a couple years ago, wanted to go back and watch through Star Trek Next Generation, which is the series that I love the most. I really have things I love about the Enterprise series, even though I didn't finish it. But I love the concept, love the characters. But with Picard coming out right now, I watched the pilot with my brother. I enjoyed it, but I was like, there's so many little things in here that are thread throughout it that have a lot to do with characters and story that mostly originated in Next Generation. So it's my favorite. A lot of people love it. This last year, I think, was the 25th anniversary or something like that of Next Generation. It was a mark of something, but I've never watched the whole thing straight through. I watched a lot of it when I was little, when it was brand new. My mom was a huge Star Trek fan, and my cousins all watched it and talked about it. I wanted to go back through it, and I thought to myself, after I watched the first season, I want to talk about this show, not review it, just talk about it, because I was excited. I felt like I was a little kid discovering something for the first time, which I was and am. But I was like, who am I going to talk to about it? And I thought, wait a minute, Kirsten loves the Next Generation. And so I asked her, she was like, oh, absolutely. So much so that in the last week, she burned through first season, and you stopped?
I did. I just finished the end of season 1 today.
Okay.
I held back for you.
Good, because I've been waiting a week since we talked about it to watch the next part. So I was excited, but I'm just excited. I want to talk about characters. I want to talk about things I like, things I think I can see where problems are. Not reviewing it. I just wanted to just discuss it. But mostly talk with my enthusiasm with another enthusiast of Star Trek. I asked Josh, he's like, yeah, I don't care about talking about Star Trek. I was like, fair enough. So anyway, so it's like fantasy. All the videos that Kirsten's going to be in, Josh has no interest in doing those, but that's okay. But before we start, Kirsten, hit me up with your background, what you love about, not what you love about Star Trek, I won't go crazy, but like just what is about Next Generation and how much of a fan, how many times you've watched it, whatever. Because you're apparently in college. I know you've met a few and you have a theme there, but go ahead.
Yes. No, I was introduced to it by my parents, just like you were. It was actually one of the few good memories I have from my father growing up, type of a thing. But that part actually stuck with me. And my mom wasn't a huge fan, but she wasn't against it. But I still enjoyed watching it. And then, of course, later on, Voyager came out, and that was new, and enjoyed watching that too. But all the movies in that, loved them growing up, and I always enjoyed the message that they had to share. And now that I have my own little one, I'm subjecting him to them too, of course. He gets to be my little Wesley.
Forcing him into pictures with Will Wheaton and
Yes.
How many of the cast have you met? Just Will?
No, Gates McFadden as well. So we did.
Who's that?
So Beverly Crusher, I got to meet both Beverly and Wesley in a joint photo, and then got Beverly's autograph as well with me and my little one as Wesley and Beverly.
Right. What is it you love about Beverly? We're going to talk about characters a little bit, but just what is it specifically that you like about her? Do you like the character, or is it just because you have red hair?
I mean, that doesn't hurt, but I really like her. I see her very much as a strong female character, and then, as a single mom myself, I really hone into that now even more as an adult. I'm like, look at her raising Wesley on her own, but she's also got her own great successful career and is strong all on her own. It's great.
Very strong. There's a lot of that strength that comes out in this season, especially. But okay, but let's talk about. But when you were a kid when you're with your dad watching it, when it was first coming out, right? The first season when it was first aired, because I still remember the first season when my mom, I was in California. I was like 10-ish when it was first coming out. And I remember how excited the adults were. We were just little kids looking up, but I remember how freaked out they were, because this was like the first series since the original, and the original was so many years before. And then there was the movies, and everyone loved the movies. I think this came out, did this one come out before all the original or the classic cast movies, before Generations? I don't think so.
Well,
It's not like there was
so
one
first episode air date was 1987. So yes, I believe that's after all the original series.
It was 87?
That's what the Wikipedia says.
Wow. That seems way earlier than I remember. But my memory isn't that great. But I still remember the hype. I remember all of that, and I remember everyone talking about it. But that was the thing. So there's the original series, and at the time that wasn't like this big awesome thing from what I've understood. And then the movies is what really got people looking back like, you know what, that was really great. And then they came back with this fantastic budget, fantastic idea, really dynamic crew, and all the changes, like having a Klingon on the command bridge and stuff like that was like a big step from everything you'd experienced with Klingons and the Federation before. Just a lot of big jumps like that, having an android, the Betazoid, especially, right? You know, these interesting characters. And I think that's been the problem with every other cast since then, was they didn't have such an intriguing dynamic between diversity, not just with ethnics and gender, but just the chemistry and the connections between the characters, which is my favorite part of Next Generation. But we'll talk about that. But that was all the excitement. It came out, and I was like going back and I watched the pilot. I'm like, hey, what was everyone so jazzed out about? And oh my gosh, that one is tough to sit through. So it's the first appearance of Q, and Q is freaking awesome. But like, it's so, how do I say? They really pull out, like, you're trying to figure out who Picard is. And of all the characters in this show, they have little moments with each of them trying to introduce the cast. You have Riker piloting, trying to pilot and connect the ship with the saucer without the guidance systems or whatever. So he had to do it all manually, and he's just like, okay, Picard's kind of a jerk. He's like, you're gonna do it the hard way, and dangerously, and putting everyone's lives in danger and everything. Little things like that. Riker meeting Data and he calls him Pinocchio. All those really key little signature moments on introducing each of the characters, including Will. Beverly come in, and she met, Will, a few lines about her father, all that stuff. About his father, Will's father, her ex-husband, all this stuff that comes in later. But the main
dead husband, not ex-husband. Important difference.
Yes. That's a big difference. But there's all this little moments introducing the crew, but no one has a lot of time except for this showdown between Picard and Q. We're not going to do as big blanket out review and breakdown of every episode, but this one's kind of a big thing because you have Q, who's like this is the one where he's judging humanity. I don't remember the whole little controversial or the discussions and the points of how he gets out of it, other than doesn't Picard basically come out and say, you're judging us from everything in history, but you should see how we're doing now. And he he gives them a 24-hour trial period or something like that. Yeah,
he gives them a current test. They basically pass the current test at Farpoint, right? Mystery at Farpoint. And
when they go to the net thing, right?
The net thing was right at the beginning. That was
that's where they run into him in trial.
Yes, and exactly. And Picard calls him out on it and says, yes, we did used to be like that. I fully admit that, but we've come so far. Try us for who we are now. Yeah.
So I can't remember, what was the test of Farscape?
You've already forgotten the mystery?
Yes, I forgot now.
So the entity that was captured and abused there, and at first they think it's a spaceship coming to assault them. They're not sure what it is, but they resist taking defensive positions and firing on it and show that they understand and compassion.
Right. Like, look, we're exploring. We're not warring. Yeah. Okay. Well, that whole episode was just a lot of philosophical concepts being thrown at each other and kind of a big debate in even a court setting that you're like, is this what this
but it's got magic. Yeah. Cues all over the place.
Yeah. And that's good to watch them bounce around in costumes and stuff. And you're like, okay, this is intriguing. And they keep talking about different stuff in history, and you're seeing the Picard's culture. But this was your first introduction to Picard. And Picard, throughout the first season, he's very you can tell he's an intellectual. He's he's literate. I mean, he can read and write, but he's he understands literacy and calls back to fiction and stuff like that. Even in the holiday.
Shakespeare, of course, his favorite.
Yeah, very classic. And a lot of that plays out, but in the later seasons, it's a lot more about him not like in action like in the movies, which a lot of people don't like that Picard. He's different, but he's a little more hands-on. He's not It's not even the right word. I mean, that's the thing is he's not watching this season. He's not the Picard that I remember from the show later on, where he's a lot more fun. When I'm thinking about episodes where he's doing stuff with Q, just different things.
He warms up, but he bonds. And going back and having seen them all, and then watching this anew, trying to see it with fresh eyes, I was really able to see that because I just rewatched it within 3 years. Yeah, and so having finished the end, and then I rewatched a couple of the movies so that I could fully embrace everything in Picard, because you definitely need to watch at least the last 2 Trek movies from TNG before you hop into Picard. And it really is, you get to see him evolve as a person, as a captain. You get to see their relationships just as I imagine shipmates would. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I do remember the very end of the last episode where he walks into the poker game and he's like, I should have come a long time ago and sat with them, and he's always had that subordinate level, even though a lot of equal respect with everyone, a lot of personal relationships with them, but it was always like, I'm the captain, you guys
level of separation.
Yeah, and it's just like the thing from The Office where Michael Scott was told by his little boss, he's like, why can't your friends be your friends and your coworkers be your coworkers? And throughout the whole show, Picard was always the coworker. It took a long time for him to start coming out with those relationships where he became friends. And that's the heart of Picard that you saw later on, that you're like, he's so stale, he's just kind of a jerk, and so it's kind of interesting seeing this side of him growing into the later Picard. But it's very early. Little moments because of that, because you know where he's going to go. Little moments like when he first lets Wesley on the bridge, when he first makes him an acting ensign, he's like yelling at him. When he and the way he does that in that episode where he brings them on, he's like, there's no, and then Rick Riker's like, you're not supposed to have kids on the bridge. Those were your orders. He's like, well, I can't go back on my orders. So it's like, okay, acting ensign. And he's like, you want to sit here? Do you want to go tell your mom? He's like, I'll sit here for a while, Looks at everyone else. He doesn't stop and smile at Wesley ever. It's everyone else responding because they know Picard and they know how excited he is. That's an example. Like, he's still stale. He's still in charge. He's still the coworker, even though he's doing gracious things and right and everyone else. And you see, it'll always be Riker looking over at Troy, or someone else having a look, and then showing someone else that's happy. But Picard's always like, he's all serious. That little stuff, you're like, you see those little moments that he's like gonna go into this a lot more heartfelt character. You know what I mean?
Well, I love they grab that right at the beginning. He asks Riker after he gives him that kind of jerk-like test, and you're like, oh, he's kind of a jerk in the private, one-on-one that they had. And he goes, oh, and you're gonna hold to not let me do, go down on away missions. And so he, gives him that little test, and he goes, one more thing. And then it's a totally casual thing. I'm uncomfortable around children.
I don't know. It's like, of all things, he's like, just so you know, I know my personal problems. I don't do well around kids. He's like, keep me, just
keep me in line. Help me not make a fool of myself around kids. And so then they build on that. And you even see that even within that first season of those little moments, like you said.
Yeah. So there's a lot of episodes that are based around different characters that maybe, I guess talk about just some of the characters instead of like going through the episodes, because that'll just kind of come out. A few key things that came out were specific episodes we'll mention, but just going around the horn of the bridge, it's interesting to see them in colors that they don't stay in for very long throughout the show. You have Geordi in the red, because I don't remember the colors. That's not security, because I thought red was security, but that's what he's in. And then
red. He's in engineering though. Right. Geordi. So isn't that yellow?
Yeah, he's in yellow later when he's head of engineering, but right now he's in engineering now, but he's wearing red.
But
way
he's in red.
Smarter Trekkies could explain the colors and the reasoning, but you have them in different colors for
I don't speak Klingon either, just to put that out there right now.
Maybe he just kind of got a little bigger and Worf lost some weight and they just swapped uniforms. Maybe that's all it was. Okay, so Geordi in the first season didn't have a lot of episodes other than a lot of intrigue about his visor. That came up in several episodes. It was kind of intriguing that one episode, I can remember the mission, but they went to he beamed down on the away team. Oh, they found like that ship where everyone was dead. Something like that, if I remember right. And they were like, oh, we hooked up this new thing where you guys will be able to see, it's like a webcam. You guys can see my POV basically on the bridge. And Picard's like, yeah, let's see it. I want to see what you see. And he beams down, and Picard gets just so entranced in what Geordi can see and energies and all that kind of stuff.
This is how he sees it all the time. Yeah.
It was kind of cool. And you're like, wow, we're spending like 5 minutes on Geordi's vision, you know, just for no reason. And it doesn't come back later on, other than Riker's like, Picard's like, what is that figure? Wait, stop, go back. What is that you see? He's like, that's Riker. He's like, oh. And then he like cuts out. Riker's like, we're gonna have a job to do here, right? He's like, oh, I'm sorry. I just got distracted, you know?
People are dying on this freighter.
Right.
Yeah, but it was such a human moment. I enjoyed seeing that for each of them, but you're right. In reality, you're like, they're dying, hurry.
Yeah. So, and there's a description he gives when it's awesome, where Picard, this is stuff I love about this series, but where Picard's like, how can you make anything out of that? And he's like, well, it's just like you. How can you hear a child out of all the noise, or whatever it was? You can give an example of, you hear one sound out of all this other sound. That's how he can interpret this big mess in front of him into this is what those things are. Like, this is cool. It's this cool little concept they came up with, they threw in there. So you kind of get to see what he's going through. The scene where, the test that he had with Q later on, where he's like, or with Riker, when Riker had the Q powers, he was like, I can give you vision. He's like, I know, but at what cost? I don't, you know, and this isn't, it's not natural, whatever, you know, all those little reasons. Like, ethically, he didn't want to lose who he was. And, you know, there's some of what makes Geordi is his vision, and that him's compensating for that with the other things that give him an advantage in certain situations versus human vision, even though he's never seen like a sunrise and stuff like that. Which is why I love whichever movie it is later, where he's on that planet where he has human vision. He's just staring at the sunset. It's just so cool. Because you know that stuff, because you know how much he cares about it. It's so neat. But those little human things, you said it, it's human stuff.
That, and the moment where he's in there, it's one of your first introductions to Dr. Crusher, you know, in her doctor capacity, and he's complaining about the pain. He says he's always in pain from it, and I just remember watching and being like, oh, you know, like that. Oh, that sucks. But the options are exploratory surgery. He said, or going without, if I remember right. And
he's so,
and pain meds. That's what it was, and pain meds, which would make him be able to do his job. Right.
But Geordi is such he's always been a constant. He never had a lot of weaknesses, like he always did the right thing. He was always the good person. He never had, from what I remember, we'll see as the show goes on, but he never had moments or episodes where like he made wrong decisions for his own selfish desires, or, you know, he didn't make mistakes. Like, this is more important to me. I gotta do this at the risk of this. It was always, I'm on my job. I'm a good person. And I'm friends with Data, you know, and I'm just trying to do my best to kind of keep the you know, I guess friendliness, but he's the one that binds everyone, like, emotionally. He's the one that had a lot more conversations when Guinan gets in the show later. He's just a lot of those social interactions. He's everyone's friend. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
He is a very sweet guy. I don't, off the top of my head, we'll see, like you said, as the season progresses, if there's any fights or anything. I remember he has his own struggles that we, you know, discover throughout the series.
Maybe I just remember him this way, because this is like the way he is now is the way I always remember him. But I really like, he's just all heart, he's just all integrity. He always seems to make the best honest decisions that he can, and he's very, very capable. And it's always, Picard is always like, Geordi, not like this, you know, Geordi, what do you got? And he's always like giving him his interpretation or a complete assessment of the engineering, and that's it. That's his job. And fix it. Okay, I'll fix it. Just like Scotty was like that, except Scotty had a lot of other fun stuff about it, or different colorfulness about his character. But anyway, Geordi is just, he's a good person, a good counterpart for Data, which hasn't really started in this season. Speaking of Data, let's talk about Data. I forgot how much they put in his character, which I didn't remember. Maybe it's only in these early seasons. When he starts answering a question, he like rambles, or he'll, if it's a what's the word? when someone asks a question that it was not supposed to be answered. What's that word? What's that phrase? It starts with an R. That was a rhetorical question. Was a rhetorical question, and he'll start spewing out all this information about the answer. It bored everyone's like, Data, we got it. And then there's one scene, it was hilarious, where he's talking to the computer and he starts boring the computer, and the computer's like says something like, yeah, I got the answer like from the beginning of what you started to say or whatever. And he was just baffled at he's trying to figure out human interactions just in general. He doesn't know, he's learning what a joke is, and there's scenes about that. You know, he's trying to understand what fantasy is when someone's speaking like allegorically. You know, the episode where and we haven't even gotten to the emotion chip, thank goodness, because that opens up a big thing or can of worms with Data later. But it's fun seeing him try to explore and understand concepts. And my favorite example was at Tasha's funeral, where after she talks to each person, half of them are in tears, half of them are being strong, but he's just got the Data face. But then at the very end, he walks up to the hologram or transmitter or whatever, and Picard sees him. He goes up and just checks to see if he's okay, and Data's just like, I'm sitting here and all I'm processing is thinking about the effects on me with her being gone, not about her. You know, what's my life going to be like now without her being in it? And he's like, did I completely miss the point of the service? And then Picard just smiles. And he's like, no, you got it. You know, I was like, that is what a funeral is. And that's the thing. It's like about remembering them, but like, you know, contemplating how is this affecting me? And that's kind of a darker side and a heavier emotion in a funeral scene like that. But he got it. And they had to stop in that he is, of all those people, all the beings there, the android is one that they they highlighted to bring out that point of what a funeral is. And I remember in a very near season, he's having a conversation with Riker asking about death. And I don't remember which scene that was. It's a beautiful speech that they give, but that's not relevant now because I don't remember it and it's not happened yet. But Data learning about human things, learning about when he learns about who's it? The detective, not Sherlock. Oh, the other one. There's the one that Picard went to go.
Where Picard is the like Dick.
I remember what it was.
It's not Dick Grayson. What is? No, that's
Dick.
Dick Bix. I just watched it like earlier today.
Anyway, but he's like, who is this? And then George, he's like, and they're telling me, oh, he's a detective, a private eye. He's like, well, what is that? Just explaining the concept of what a private investigator is like, that's really doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. So he goes and researches it. So now the rest of the episode, he's like all in character because Data just likes absorbing that information. It's so fun watching him discover things in the Chinese finger trap.
Yes. Well, they use a non-human to highlight humanity, and that's what he always is, shining the spotlight on humanity. And they do set that up right there in the beginning when Riker meets him and he's whistling and, oh, you're not human, and he goes, oh, but lucky you. I would give anything to be you, basically, is what he says to Riker on their very first meeting. And so they set that up so well. And I always thought, if we were comparing it to, the original series, that they used Data was kind of the replacement for Spock. You had to have this emotionless
analytical
person who's exactly and kind of superior intellect.
On the way humans behave. And that's why the famous line of most memorable line for me about Kirk is when he says that Spock was the most human of everyone he ever met. So because of that reason, because he's the one that's absorbed all the information about humanity and grew into be a person. Data does the same thing. He like analyzes everything for all these seasons, and then by the time you see him to now where he's showing up in Picard in whatever capacity, I didn't finish the show yet, that he's like still like such a beloved character, even though he's just a robot, he's an android, it's just cool. I like that his moment where they're all under the influence and he hooks up with Tasha and he doesn't know how to handle it, and she's like, it didn't happen, stuff like that. He's just someone dies on the table and he acts shocked, like things are just like it's never occurred to him how something, things change in this world, in his life. and he responds to it, and it's just interesting to watch, and so beautifully written. And what's his name? The actor, I love him. I follow him on Twitter.
Brent Spiner?
Brent Spiner, yeah. He's so great. I loved him in Night Court, by the way. But he's just he is just so good at being blank, but expressive while being just blank. It's just so neat. Anyway, Data's fun. He hasn't had a lot of his own stories except for his brother.
Lore.
Yeah, Lore.
Lore. Yep. Lore. Yep.
That episode I didn't really like. Maybe it was too dark.
Lore's a tool.
Yeah, literally. But there's all that. He always has that arrogance where he's always hanging over Data's head, like Data's the inferior of the two of them, and then
highlighting Lore's insecurity.
Yes, yeah. It just always gets me. It's like, ooh, you just don't be mean to Data. Data's the guy, you know. So lovable, and everyone's intrigued by him. I love the conversation with him and McCoy in the pilot too. It was really fun. Anyway, so Data's a lot of fun. So here's what I noticed with Worf.
How about those skirts in those pilots? Like even the guys had those dress skirt things.
Yeah.
So yes, it was a rough watch.
The wardrobe changed quite a bit after the first early parts. I don't know how far into season 2. Worf didn't have a lot. I thought it was so weird that Worf didn't have a lot of attention until like very late in the season when they found those 3 renegade Klingons, and then he had his culture when the guy dies and they roar. Where the comment he makes about the woman that Q's tempting him with, and he is like, this is, or he says something about like, you know, how I don't know what the word is. He says something about how savage their mating is or something, and how he says like human women couldn't handle. You know what I mean? I can't remember who he's talking to. I think it was Riker. But yeah, all that stuff with Worf mostly about Klingon culture and how it's interesting how he's not a part of that right now. He's like cut off, and that does affect him as a person. We see more of that later on as he has a son and his wife comes back and other things, other stories around him. But he's so intriguing to have a Klingon on the bridge of the Enterprise, and they don't even do anything with him until late in the season. Like everyone else had several episodes before Worf got one. I just thought that was really weird. And he's not. I just remember Worf being, again, he carried on to Deep Space Nine because he was so everyone loved Worf because he really grew up, because
they had to use recognizable characters to save Deep Space Nine.
Right, but it was like it was a safe bet to pick him. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, he's a very loyal, strong figure, but you never think of him as aggressive in a bad way or misogynistic or right. Anything like that. He when Tasha is his commander, above him, whatever the right word is for that, right. he's absolutely respectful to her and follows her, and
I always forget that he wasn't head of security at the beginning, that she was, and I can't understand really what his place is on the bridge, but he just couldn't. It seems like he does the same thing now as he does later on when he is the head of security, but he's like in charge of the phasers and tractor beams and all that stuff, behind the bar. But Tasha's out there, but he's back there already doing similar stuff. I guess she is doing those same things. It does cut to her when he starts talking about combat. So I guess that makes sense.
They turn on the link when they're talking to another ship, and then you see after Tasha's gone that it's Worf opening the channel.
So she's she's communications. So they've come a long way from meeting Uhura with the little dish in her ear, so yeah. So and she wore red, so maybe that's security. I don't know. Okay. Well, Worf is cool, and my favorite part with Worf is where the Klingon ambassador that they talked to, he was like, they were so intrigued with him being a part of Federation, but they were like, the way you've behaved, you always, once your term is up in the Enterprise, you could come and join us. He's like, I'll consider it. And he was like honored for the offer. And then he had to reassure Picard like 3 or 4 times before credits roll. He's like, I was just being courteous,
Be polite. Yeah, exactly. I love that.
But it's just like, hey, I'm not leaving. Calm down, everyone, because everyone's like staring at him as he's walking up the ramp, and he's like, I was just being kind, I like that. And I like how Worf is another example of someone that's trying to understand humans, even though he's a living being compared to Data, and he has a different perspective. But he's a very, I don't want to say primal, because they're very, sophisticated.
So they're a more warrior race.
And so values and ethics and things that they have are very different from even the Federation. The Federation is all about saving lives and all this stuff, where with this warrior mentality, it's like, what, if someone dies honorably or something like that's a better reward than whatever the mission may have been, and it's
day to die.
It's almost like their people are expendable in some ways. It's just interesting watching early stages of Worf, because everything is very fresh to him and it's very easy to see that. Yar, when Yar's talking to him on her last episode, is one of my favorite conversations, where he basically says, when they're coming up on the sparring competition or whatever, tells her that he would bet on it. She's the best, and he would.
She was a safe bet.
Yeah, she's like, really, you bet on? And that just his approval of her, she just gets so much joy.
Yeah,
I respect out of that. I love that moment, and that's why I like in the funeral. That's her looking at him was my favorite part of that, other than Data. Anyway, we're not going to talk about the funeral, because it's too much. It was so much to talk about, that so much was happening in that scene, and I want to get emotional because it was good. The funeral scene is really, really good. I felt like, and I know some of it from what I've understood, is that her she didn't like the way that they weren't giving her character any growth or anything so early on and stuff, and so part of it she wanted out of the show, and so that's I think, from what I understand, that was part of why her death happened so early. But I was like, her character was the most intriguing. Like, I loved Yar. I loved the concept where she came from this rural
bad world,
and like she was on the streets by herself, and that she preserved, and she, even her interaction with, even though she was under the influence, when she came on to Data, when she mentioned, she's like, all I want is someone, some tenderness, and some softness after the things that she saw and witnessed and experienced with other people, that she's, as a rape victim, I'm not a rape victim, but I understand there's this appreciation for sensuality as opposed to excitement, you know what I mean? And when she was having that conversation with Data, that translated into seeing her character. And there was the other episode where she brought up her rape gangs to the planet, and I don't remember which one it was, where she talked about things that she saw. I don't think that was the one where she was in combat with life.
She did chastise Q right there in the beginning about, they saved me, and you should be on your knees for what the Federation has done for me. So she has kind of little bits like that several times about that.
Yeah.
Might have been but I know there's several. I just can't remember.
Yeah. And so you saw that as a part of her, and where her coming from such a rough background, being the head of security for the who's in charge of the captain's safety of one of those most glorified ships, that's a big responsibility, and that shows a lot of progress for her as a person to go through that career shot, to be put that she's in charge of safety and security for other people, for someone that was so dependent on safety and security as a child that didn't have it. You know what I mean? It's interesting, and there's so much that they could have explored with that I thought they did really well with those few episodes they had focused on her, which felt like a lot. And then she died, and I was like, that's so tragic, and it's a tragic ending for a tragic character. And she died, and she even made the comment at the funeral, I hope I died trying to or saving others, or maybe taking action or something like that, or as a warrior. I can't remember what she said. I think that's what she said to Worf. I don't remember, but that's just all on her character, and her death was an act of insecurity, trying to get to the ship to get Troy out. Mm-hmm. It was all in character, it was all good, but it just seemed like very early, or the first 10 minutes of the episode, she's gone, and then Picard has to have that moment where he's like, "Okay, we're all hurting from losing her, but we need to focus on this task, or else we're going to lose someone else." So Troy's in the shuttle, so they had to pause that story, get to the end, and then have the funeral, which is like ripped your heart out on that cheap set. But whatever, it's early season, everything else going on this show,
the holodeck. Yeah.
But I tell you what, I almost called my brother. I was like, I was watching that tar monster move across the screen on the ground, I was like, is this just my HDTV, or did it always look that bad? I had to call him, and I was like, James, did it always look this awful? And he's like, no, that was notoriously awful watching the blob move over. But I tell you what, when that thing comes up, the humanoid form comes up out of the tar stuff,
Yeah.
it looks so good. And in HD, it's even better. It's just all shiny and detailed. There's dripping and everything. When Riker's underneath there, like, gasping and stuff. It's so good. I was like, you did that great. But then you have this, like, someone got a Sharpie on the video.
Because practical effects always stand up better than CGI.
Of course. But oh boy. The rest of that episode, I remember him being a lot scarier, that creature on the planet. And they kind of made him kind of dumb. His dialogue, he was just kind of saying kind of brute kind of things instead of like a menace.
I am evil.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a monster instead of like an intriguing villainous creature that they had to like outwit or meet intellectual grounds with or something. But even the conversation where she had with Tasha, not Tasha, with Troy, where it was interesting, where she was like manipulating him or maneuvering the conversation, figuring him out through her psychology versus Picard trying to like talk and negotiate, and then both of them work together at the end. But it's an interesting, it's an interesting villain. But I remember him being a lot scarier than just being I'm a jerk, but I'm all powerful jerk. It's like, okay. Her death was good. Tar Monster was bad. Tasha was awesome. But I really liked her costumes. I liked her hair. Even when she was in the dress, when she came on to Daily, she's a beautiful, beautiful actress and just a great character. I loved her lines. I loved her loyalty. And she just had a really cool place and a lot of good little interactions with the rest of the cast or the crew. You know what I mean? It was it sucks. I know she comes back. The actress comes back later on. I don't know any of their names. I'm sorry. I know some of them, but
I don't know them all either.
But she was really cool. It was a really intriguing character. It's too bad that she died. Even the one where they were fighting for because the king wanted her.
Oh yes.
The only thing with that one is like when they're having the conversation and she knew that she could take her, but then they look outside the balcony and they see the wife down practicing and swinging around the poles and stuff. I was like, she doesn't look that scary. Like the stunts that they were doing right now on that scene were really dated. It was like, okay, I can take her with no training. But anyway, now it would be like a lot more crazy stunts and action and everything. But whatever. Good stuff with her. Who else would we talk? Troy. How'd you like Troy being represented? I think she was in there as an interesting take on a woman character on the bridge, as far as not being too overly sexualized while being very sexualized. Like, what do you think about Troy? I'll let you talk.
Well, no, we definitely we first see her in the short skirt thing, and at first you think maybe that's kind of sexist, but earlier you saw a dude wearing the same short skirt. Like, it's just a glimpse, it's not a main character, but you just see him walk by and you're like, did I just that long you see him go by and you're like, okay, at least it's the standard uniform.
And being a guy who's worn skirts in his life in different plays and things, I can say super comfortable, and I really wish it was socially acceptable. I could run around in a kilt or something.
There you go.
But the one he was wearing did not look really, like it gave a lot of scream.
Yeah, they're just this straight, boxy thing. But no, she is interesting because of all the characters on the show, and I could be wrong, and as I go through these again, maybe I'll change my mind, but she's definitely the most sexualized of them, of the women. Riker's sexualized.
Fair enough. So, hey, you pair them together. That makes sense.
Right? Her outfits, she gets like 3 right away, whereas everyone else is pretty consistent. And I always found that weird. I never really understood why she had a separate outfit, but she was part of the bridge crew clearly, and then it didn't make sense to me why a counselor was part of the bridge crew. Although as we're discovering new species and interacting, maybe that does make more sense in that type of a universe. But
it comes up a lot, like almost everyone they meet, and just even situations. What are you feeling? Like that's one of the first go-tos. So sometimes it'll be like, what do you think, as far as the Starfleet procedures. I mean, he knows the what's it called? Their creed, their rules. The
directive, the first directive, prime directive.
Picard knows the directive inside and out, but that's Riker. What do you think strategically? Tasha, what do you? Not Tasha. Yeah, Troy. What are you sensing? What are you figuring out? What do you think? Is this a life like that episode? And then what can the ship handle? To everyone, like everyone has their different little cues. But you're right, in an exploratory capacity that the ship is in, her telepath abilities really come into play quite a bit, and naturally, which makes me think: is she even a part of Starfleet? I don't know if she is. I don't know if she was an exact, like if she was recruited, pulled up from the ranks of Starfleet, or if she is just kind of a third party kind of a thing whose place is there to as a counselor, advisor for Picard.
I'll have to look later on in the series. I think she has pips though. I think she has rank.
You're right.
Pips when she gets more of a standard uniform.
Just talking about
Yeah, with her,
and by
her
ranking,
empath abilities.
In Generation, she ends up flying the ship, and that goes down by rank of crew, so she would have to be Starfleet. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, it makes even more questioning. Why does she wear different clothes all the time?
I don't know if it's so she can quickly jump in and out of sessions, and that makes people want to open up to her more because she's not in the uniform. I don't know. I've never really liked most of the uniforms they put her in. I personally, in this weird hairdo with I don't care for a lot of the outfits she's in personally, but it was just them trying to maybe differentiate that she was of a couple different cultures. I'm not sure.
Maybe that's part of her like contract, is like, hey, these are my religious beliefs or my species beliefs that
my Beta Z side, and
certain ways that you can't restrict me and my clothes and my hair based on my position. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. I'll go with what you have to say instead of it being like it was an 80s and 90s show written and directed by a bunch of men. Whatever. Okay, she's really cool. I like how they had an instant chemistry and a history with her and Riker.
That was cute.
And I like how that comes up later on when they introduce other characters and Riker's, many relationships that comes out through the show. And I like how it always comes back to how she feels. And the when she was engaged, that episode was really hard to watch because you're like, that's sad, because she was all culture that and you knew she wasn't going to go through with it, but it was like it was all building up just properly. By the way, that engagement party was one of my favorite scenes ever. Other than
though, oh my god,
who was talking to the really tall guy? Was it Data or Worf? One of them was just so intrigued by him.
Data was intrigued by all of them, so Picard had to call him out on it and say, you're circling the room like a buzzer.
Yeah. It was so fun at the very end, and Troy, way out of character, stands up so exasperated with all the parents. She gets up and she like knocks over the cake or something. I don't remember what it was. And she just and the gong. That's what it was. Hitting that stupid gong. She gets smashes it, and you're like, yeah, that's really funny. And then she goes to the holodeck to blow off steam. And then Riker. That was a good episode with her and Riker, when Riker has to go out there and talk to her and congratulate her because he's not going to interfere, but at the same time, you get that's the point where you start learning that like his career was the number one thing, and him taking on a ship at some point, having turned down a job to serve with Picard on the Enterprise, that affected their relationship and how, whatever their history was, which we haven't, had fleshed out yet. They did talk about that he's one that can't really commit to a woman because of his career. And that, at least that's how he feels. And that really, that came into that episode where she was like, they both had this kind of, I hope you get what you're looking for kind of a thing, which was like, but right now we can't be together and you're going to have to marry this guy. So I guess that's the end of us forever. You know what I mean? And it was just like, it was just sickening my stomach because I hate that.
It was a little frustrating because and I could be way off. This was just Kirsten's take on it. But watching Riker come to her in the holodeck there, and she goes, what, I'm not called Miyazaki anymore, no beloved for me today, and he's like, I can't, you're getting married, and this is really hard and unfair to me. And I was like, you just slept with like how many people so far episodes in, buddy? Like, what are you calling her out for that she's following through on her family duties and feeling all but hurt when it just was weird to me. I don't know.
I know what you're saying, and it's like okay, are you really trying to win her over, or is she like someone you compartmentalize on a shelf? You're like, she's safe. I'll get to her when I'm ready for her, but I'm gonna go play on all these sex planets that we land on in the meantime. And then it's like, oh, you're getting
my backup plan or what? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like his insurance. That is disrespectful, and it's frustrating. And you kind of want him to come in and express how he's like, you want that "don't marry him" speech, even if we can't be together now. Like, no, don't do it. And that comes up. That's well done in a lot of other stories. It didn't need to be done here. But I know what you're saying. You're like, that's what you wanted in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but at the same time, I was like, well, that's really selfish, though, if you're holding her to a different standard than yourself. I don't know.
But it shows the complexity in Will, too, because he's so conflicted in what he really wants. And maybe he's not ready to settle down. Maybe it has nothing to do with the career at the same time. But then that's also a thing. Is like what I'm focused on in my life is my career. I do care about her, but I also enjoy women. I'm not ready to stop for her, and so in the meantime, this is what my life is. And so it makes sense, and it shows like when she might be out of the picture, that really sucks for him, and that really showed. It was a really good episode with that. And first introduction of her mom, whatever her name was, who she's also the voice of the computer, and wasn't she like Gene Roddenberry's?
She was in TNG. She was a nurse. She was the nurse in that loved Spock in the original series, not TNG, sorry, in the original series, but yes.
Yeah, she's awesome though, and yeah, I like her as she's the voice of the computer whenever they talk to it. She's really cool. She's a fun character, and I love that whenever they come back with her, but she's just eccentric, and she doesn't care. The conversations about like having the wedding and the nude and stuff like that, and just she
represents that weird parent that everybody has. I feel like everybody has some kind of relative that they're like, duh, yes, that is so embarrassing.
Yeah, and also that's the parent who's like, you're never good enough for, or she's always like nitpicking your house and stuff. When she first gets there, it's like, oh, you're working on your telepathy, you're not just talking all the time. Oh, she's very condescending in that way. She's a very good, exaggerated mother. It's a really good character. Troy's awesome. Riker at this point, he is what he is. He's a womanizer. I don't know if that's fair to say. He enjoys women. It's not like he manipulates or
yeah, you don't get the sense he's pressuring anyone or doing anything against anyone's will, that's for sure. But he definitely isn't about to say no to an opportunity, it seems like.
Yeah, exactly. He's an indulgent person as far as women go. But he's very loyal to the captain. I love how much they make a point of that. This is different than the original series because Picard does not go on the away missions. And even the point where Picard has to step up and say, there's a specific reason I'm going on this one. Riker's like, okay, if it's serious enough that you're doing it, how serious I take it. That's a big deal whenever they say it, because they've made such a big deal out of Riker being such a point man. I'm going down because it's dangerous for the captain to go down. Very different from Kirk. But whenever Picard's like, I'm going down, you're like, whoa, that means there's something real going on. I like that. I like the responsibilities in play that I don't really think about in a lot of the other shows. And maybe it's because I haven't watched them enough. But Riker, his job is protect the captain and be his number one advisor. I didn't mean number one to say that like the cliche, but that's really the way he's played out and scripted. He is there in every situation to protect and advise Picard, and that's it. And it's great. He has great interactions with the crew and great stories that build up later on. But I like him. He's very straightforward. I like him better with the beard.
Agree. And I don't say that much about beards, but I agree.
I think he looks good with a beard. Not like he doesn't look good now. Jonathan Frakes is a good looking guy. And I can, that's why he's there. He's tall, dashing, dark hair. Exactly right. But
he has a smile though. When he smiles, it looks so sincere. You know what I mean? Like it shows in his eyes. Like it just shines out, and you just believe it. You're just like, oh, like look at him playing with Wesley, or look at him.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I love about how he's the reflection of what just happened with Picard. Whenever Picard does something increasingly compassionate or fun or something that you have to look at, Will's the one that he's the fun guy and the mediator for the rest of the crew. Picard does something funny, we can all laugh and enjoy it, but don't expect him to crack a smile. You know what I mean? And because my smile just tells it all. And you're exactly right. And that's why it always ends. Every episode, it feels like Picard will say something, he'll cut to Riker smiling, looking at Troy, and she just...
It's either Riker's doing that like side-eye smile thing, or else if it's like a commercial break, he's all like, because something serious just happened. The
dramatic pauses when something just was... What? Dun, dun, and then cut. And I love the way they do. You know, speaking of that, you know, thank you for mentioning that. This is one of the things I had to tell my brother about, or call my brother. This may sound so obvious for anyone that's ever watched an episode of Star Trek, but I love the creative way that they use the commercial breaks. And the way they use it is whenever they cut to a commercial after one of those dramatic pauses or something, something just happened. Oh, you know, it'll freeze, go to commercial, and come back with the captain's log, and you're watching the ship. You have an exterior shot of the ship, and the captain or Riker, whoever it is doing their supplemental log. They're catching the audience up on what's going on. That does two things. One, it reminds you where you were before the commercial break, but two, it's an interesting and it's not a boring way of establishing what's been going on in case you weren't following all of the dialogue, because they would write these scripts, they send them to, you know, scientists and stuff that would put in all the jargon to make it sound scientific-y, and then they would wash it out, and then they play the actor, and give to the actors, and then they play it. But like for sometimes in the audience, especially a lot of the technical stuff with engineering, stuff with the science, stuff with the species, whatever, even following the diplomacy, some of the episodes got really layered in a lot of who's doing what and what the cultures are and stuff. But going to that captain's log at the end of a commercial, it picked you up, like, in case you missed anything, not if you weren't here, but if you didn't catch everything, here's 3 lines to summarize what's going on. And you can jump right back in. And sometimes, and maybe that sounds dumb, because we all know I suck with plot. We all know that. I can't follow plot a lot of times. But that is a really good way of coming back from a commercial. Instead of jumping back into a scene and, okay, here's the next line, let's catch you up on what's going on, and then go back into the situation. You know what I mean? The show can
great way to set up the show too.
Yeah, in the beginning, here's where we are, here's what planet we are, and that's, you can do that with, it's their way of doing an opening crawl like Star Wars, but it's done in a way that it doesn't slow it down. It doesn't, I mean, if you think about it analytically, it feels like, oh, we have to stop and explain to the audience, you know, 4 times in an episode. But when you're watching, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like something happened, you know, start or captain log, and then moving on, you know. I think, and we're watching this on Netflix or whatever, where there's no commercials, it just cuts right to that journal entry. You don't stop and get bored. It's a really cool way to use the narrative and the situation of the captain's log to do that, to push the story along. I think when I was watching, I really appreciated that, and it's just it's a brilliant move, I think, working with commercials. And it also helps the audience in a subtle way that people don't even think about.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like an awkward pause just happened. It doesn't stand out like a sore thumb in the Netflix without the commercial breaks.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I can't think of another show that does recaps throughout the show. Not a single show. Maybe something in the beginning, but nothing that does recaps throughout the show in case you weren't. I mean, episode to episode. But it's brilliant. It's not like they had this genius idea for that reason, for exposition, but I think it was more to work with commercial breaks, but it all works so well. Anyway, but yes, like whatever you said that I can't remember now that triggered me into remembering that part. It's a really cool use of the
Riker's
structure of the show.
Pausing for the commercial, cutting the commercial.
And there's a lot of that, and there's all that shock, and then the music sting, you know, dun dun, you know. So good. The score is awesome, by the way. I think this is my favorite. The opening shots of the Enterprise cruising around are awesome, where it comes in different angles. It's a very exciting music. The original song is very classic because it's that it's very dated. Not dated like it's not good. I'm saying dated like it captures the era very well. But their thing is all about exploration. It wasn't all excitement and action like Next Gen turns into. The Enterprise, you know, it's very energetic compared to the original. You know what I mean? And there's place for both of them. I love it. I Anything? See, what other characters we want to talk about? Will and Beverly. You love Beverly. I'll let you finish Beverly. She's you mentioned before. She's very strong and independent. She's a single mother, but also has this awesome career. But what is it that you love about her, in at least the way she's done in this season?
Well, and I typically, I don't know, I have a variety of characters I like, but for her, she's sweet too. I don't think you can watch it and think like, oh, she's bratty to people, or she treats people, she treats people poorly, because there'll be a character introduced in the next season that you're not gonna like, or at least I find that way.
Doctor.
Okay, so you do remember that? Yes. Don't like her.
My brother remind me. Yes, but I do remember the other lady that no one liked. Yeah. Not like as much, but
she doesn't come off as arrogant. I guess that's a better word. She doesn't come off. She's very personable. She's very human too, and it's neat to see her struggles, and she's trying to take care of her son, and she won't. I mean, obviously that takes priority. When you see Will is in danger, I'm sorry, Wesley. We were talking about Will Riker before. Sorry, Will Wheaton Wesley Crusher. Yes. So yes, when you see that her son Wesley is in danger, you see that, I think, with her acting, and that becomes her priority one. She suddenly, even prime directive of not interfering with this society that they're interacting with. She's like, forget that. You're not letting my son die. Like, you don't understand. You're not letting my child die.
So there's that's the episode where he goes down and accidentally breaks playing ball. It's such a funny thing when he's like, let's break Wesley down to see if the kids will also be able to enjoy the rec time here while all the adults are having sex, essentially. Let's be real.
Such a weird.
So let's see if the kids can have fun too. And so they're gonna go on this retreat, and so Wesley's playing ball, and then he breaks the glass protecting the flowers, and he's up for execution now. And then they have to use diplomacy to figure it out with the gods. And that was a cool story with that other ship or whatever that was behaving like God. And there's other scenes that are similar stories like that where the ship has to play God in other episodes I like. But that was really intriguing, how they were trying to figure this out while they were trying to stall on the planet. But you're right. Beverly coming off as a mother is very real. When Wesley took over the ship and he force fielded himself inside engineering, he was like telling they were trying to survive and fly away from the thing that was blown up, the star. She was like, that's my son who's about to kill us all. When he was in trouble and he arrested, she's like, no, that's my son. And when he was like when she left him on the elevator, and she just to see him come out on the bridge, like, just that's the one that she cares about. But she thrived in watching him grow and progress and be mature, because he was a little butt in the beginning. And it's like, I can see, I'm really curious.
He's just a kid. You can't call him a butt.
But he was playing a kid very honestly in the early episodes, and I was just thinking, like, what did demographics really think of Wesley? I wondered, in focus groups and stuff early on. I wonder if they thought he was annoying, because he's very different. There was no kids in the original series. And so when you even in the movies, when you put this kid in here who's like getting in the way, is causing trouble and stuff, he's charismatic. Everyone loves Will Wheaton. I don't like him anymore. I liked him back then. I really don't. But whatever, that's a different story. He just bugs me. Anyway, but he's a great character performer as Wesley, and I like that he does represent a child with when he walks onto the bridge, just all open-eyed and just so excited. Like, you buy that he's never been there, and that this is everything he's learning about. That's his passion. He knows everything about this ship, and he loves it. And then when he has to go and he's doing his whatever his project, his time in engineering, and the guy in charge is like, well, you got to go study now. I was like, I can learn so much more here. He's like, I know, the captain's orders. You got to go hit the books. He's like, I already know everything in those. You buy it, Yeah.
They really drive home the point. These are families on the ship. These crew members are here with their families if they have one.
Yeah. So going back to Beverly, it really does establish, like, McCoy was just a very confident, good doctor. That the fun of McCoy was his interactions with Kirk and Spock. You know, that was the
Yes.
dynamic. That was the chemistry was great. But this one, you have Beverly, where she has a history with Picard, but you have her not just being a capable and a compassionate, wonderful, capable doctor. In the episode where she beams down to try and get Troy out of the shuttle, when she's trying to explain what a doctor is and why her safety of everyone's important to her and everything.
Mm-hmm.
When he even gives her a threat, like, would you die for whatever? He says something and she's like, no, it wouldn't. You know, I would care about everyone else more than me, whatever. That comes out, but her being a mother just adds an extra layer of compassion that she has for human life and for other people and ownership. And she just, when someone dies on an alien they just met dies on her table, it hits her. It hits her hard. And then the interaction with her and Picard are really good. And I love the moments where she has to challenge his authority or his being capable, using that her trump card over him if she needs it. Because that comes up in different situations, and it's really interesting when he's incapacitated in whatever way, and she can read it. She's really good with that. She's a good flavor. I like how they utilize having a doctor in these stories when it's not always about an away mission injury. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Because there really aren't very many where someone's hurt. Pretty much in Next Generation, if someone gets shot with something, they're dead. You know what I mean? It's like, but her knowledge coming up with solutions to viruses or experimenting on if this is a real life or whatever it is, all of that is relevant. I just really think it's cool. It's a really cool character. And having her tie with Picard is great. And when they're that episode... when that's my favorite performance so far of him. I can't remember what they were doing. She found the cure or thought she had the cure, and they're all intoxicated, and Picard's just like, okay, Beverly, or whatever, and she's like, you'll call me Captain, and then he calls her
that's right, I started off by calling you Beverly, so naturally. Yeah, that's fantastic. I love their history too. I'm definitely a team shipping Picard and Beverly together. That is the couple that I wanted, and anytime I'm watching it with anyone, I'm always teasing them like, no, you belong to Beverly.
And they have those moments, even the one in the Dixie when they went into the holodeck, like, and she was in danger when the holodeck was, the security features were broken or whatever. Like, that was real. Like, he cares about her. He
got up to her face like yay close when he was like, you look good in it.
Yeah. No, yes.
That wasn't Captain Close. That was like, oh hey, I remember liking you at one point.
That was Jean-Luc Close, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I do like their chemistry. All right, well, let's just talk about a couple episodes that were staples. So other than Q coming and going, Q giving Riker, I like how Riker fell. He didn't really pass the test. That power went to his head. I thought that was really interesting that you otherwise you have your heroes and they always come out and triumph. They always do the right thing. Riker didn't in that episode. They all had to decline his offers. That everyone else did the right thing while Riker was like, "Oh, you're well."
He wanted to use it for good, though.
Yeah, of course.
But
those tests were so good. They were so well written about how he was like, "I'm gonna use it for good," and then, he got hungry with it. I like that. But a couple of things. One, they made the Ferengi for the first time, and I love.
They're so gross, but yes, they're quite the character.
This how they didn't know anything about them. They talk to them. They still have monetary exchanges that they're so valuable to them. They're laughing at the women on the ship because the
disgusting women that are clothed.
Stuff like that. They're not honorable. They're really well established as these rodents of freaking the galaxy. And then I like how the ties come in later on. Like when they have that first encounter with them, they kind of have to work together. They do their best to backstab the Enterprise, but then they get out, and then they meet them later. Like, oh, you're the guy. Oh, I remember. You're the ones that did that with the other Ferengi, and you dressed your women. We completely forgot. Yeah, you guys are crazy. And that just kept coming up. But you really established that who the Ferengi are. They can't be trusted, but they are capable. They do have their own society, their own technology, their own weapons, and they are a threat if you're not ready for them, I guess is a good way to say it. When they come up in later stories,
be very careful making a deal with them.
Yes, you have to be very careful, exactly. And you don't want to go to war with them. But, and that's the thing, the Federation's not trying to go to war with anyone. But they're not someone that are easy to get along with, but you have to get along with them. That's the way to describe the Ferengi. But that was it was a cool introduction. I like how they're like, oh, we don't know anything about this species, and they're very common species for the rest of Star Trek.
Yeah.
The Klingons, when you meet the Klingons, it's kind of a catch up on here's where they are now compared to how they were in the classic series, and that was only 1 or 2 episodes. It was really interesting, really good. But that was more about Worf.
Yeah.
But the best part was coming up on the last episode with the Kardashians. The Romulans, not the Kardashians. The Romulans. Those are later.
That was so awesome.
The Kardashians, Romulans. Because we don't want to engage any Kardashians or Kardashians.
I can't
Romulans.
stop laughing now. Sorry.
Let me know when you're ready to resume the video. Okay. All right.
Okay.
The Romulans, though, because that was right at the very end, and I love this episode. It starts up with them finding that satellite that was flying into the sun or something like that, and Data is so curious about it. It was Data, right? Yeah, they beam on, and they find the people frozen, right? It was
yes.
Worf was there, but they find the frozen people.
On that note, have you noticed at a certain point it seems like there's dual plots almost?
Yes.
In each of the episodes, then.
There's several of those, yeah, and they're interesting because they're like, because it's funny watching Picard have to deal with the stupid, like the one with the snake people with the other people, and they couldn't get on. They're trying to work on their tree while they have this big thing that's going to destroy the ship. He's like, hey, I can't deal with your stupid pettiness here. I can try to deal with this. You know what I mean? And that episode is like, okay, we found these people. Data unfroze them, and he gets so frustrated. Picard is frustrated in the beginning. He's like, okay, I appreciate the exploratory spirit of my crew, but it's just bad timing. And he's like, I don't have time. And he tells Riker,
sounds like a parent.
Yeah.
Data, like, why did you do this though? And Data's like, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Okay, good, but so he has Riker keep him off, and they're dealing with them, and they're the hillbillies and stuff. And it's so funny watching them, like, oh, let's go back to Earth, and I can start at my law firm again. And Riker's like, yeah, that's not a thing now. It's just like they're so like they can't comprehend how different. He's like, well, what do we do now? What if there's no jobs and no work? He's like, well, we just become better people. We enrich our lives, and we try and do things. Be productive. We expand and learn. And they're like, okay, and they don't know what to do. And so then they finally make contact with the Romulans, and there's this whole episode has been building up to it, and they finally come on. They won't come on the screen at first, if I don't remember. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But they finally start talking, and then it's not good because both they
decloak when their new high-end cloak,
and they're huge.
And then they finally respond in open communication. Yeah, and isn't that beautiful that they get to show off all aspects of the nerdy stuff, though? I mean, they give the ships some nice screen time.
They do. And it's well done, and it's good. There's good practical and CGI in the shots in space and stuff. But they do, and they come up with very visual or very good cinematic shots. Like from that one, like you see the front of the Enterprise, and then the back of the Romulan ship just appear, and you're like, and it shows the scale and everything. It's really cool texture and how they do that, how they frame them. Instead of it's just always like, here's the shot, here's the screen and the bridge, and then they appear facing you. It's that they do it very different in a lot of episodes. So they're in this tight negotiation that Picard's been like stressing about the whole time. How do we handle this? Do we need to put up our weapons and put up our shields? Mm-hmm. Or are they going to read that as a step of war? Do we want to wait because they can wipe us out if we're not prepared? And everyone's like, dude, we got to be prepared. And he's like, let's be diplomatic here. Let's just be patient. And then it pays off. And then this freaking hillbilly wanders onto the bridge, and he just like throws out this like a basic question. And then Picard's like, what are you doing here? Riker's like, get him off the bridge. And Picard's like, but he did ask a good question. So he turns it back to him. But like stuff like that. And Picard the whole time doesn't have time to deal with these freaking people. And then later he finally says, okay, fine. Goes down, talks to him. He's like, you're going to go back to Earth. Like, what are we going to do there? He's like, I don't care, basically. But he explains to them what life is like and where they are. But once Picard takes a few minutes to give to them, then he can go back to business. And that whole half of that episode was about those guys, you know?
Well, they're showing how far we've progressed, and then to the Romulans, or as he says in the end, how far we have yet to go. We're not getting along perfectly with every species. It's not universal peace, and so it's so great how they use the dual plot to show like this is how awesome and how far we've come, and this is the potential. Gene Roddenberry was all about our potential, right? This is the potential of what we've achieved, and then this is, but we still have somewhere to go, and so I love how they do that.
And it's a kickoff for the show, that episode especially, because it's like, look, here we are. We're out in space. We've already had several episodes where we're throwing distance and how far out we are, even though all of a sudden we can bounce back to Earth within an episode and bounce back. That episode I didn't really care for because they go back.
That haunts many children's nightmares, I think, into adulthood.
With the, I agree. I do remember that as a kid. I was like, it would creep me out with the weird, because they're really old men, bunch of old white men. And they have the little bugs going in and out of their ears and stuff like that.
Mouths and yeah.
So it's just...
It was icky. It was all Wrath of Khan gross again, yeah.
Wrath of Khan was like more horror movie. This was just like... Anyway, so I like the concept of that episode, how there was this plot and this conspiracy kind of thing going on in Starfleet, and there were several episodes leading into that, and all that stuff came off from their inspection that they had with the one admiral. Was like, I got to see how clean you are.
Yeah, you'd forgotten about it by the time we hit that episode again. You're like, oh yeah.
And he came back, and then the guy that respected when they did those tests, that he came back, and that he really respected the ship, and the his friend that he beamed down, like, come alone, that guy, and they had several other people. They were like, could they be trusted? And then they died in that episode. Like, Picard was like, this is some serious stuff, and it felt like that was a good build-up. That like had a very kind of a boring ending, like, oh, the head admiral guy was being taken over by some lizard or something. It was like, seemed too quickly.
You thought it was gonna lead further. Yeah, it did seem like that was gonna come back, whether in another episode or something.
And it could have just been like, well, we found these things, but where was the head? Where did they come from? Who's really behind trying to take over, monopolize or manipulate Starfleet? That was a good, intriguing mystery that was 3 episodes in, and it was just a weird shootout to end it. Anyway, in empty corridors, this is the head of Starfleet and the highest people, and there's like, okay, there's 3 admirals or whatever, and then Captain Picard, and one of the admirals is the one that has to go and prepare the meal. You know, it's like, could they not afford a few extras? We saw the guy in the dress running around earlier. I mean, Austin flying around somewhere. Anyway, I just didn't like that episode, whatever. But you have this build-up for the Romulans. And there's all this suspense, and it kicks off because at the end of that, there's no battle, there's no shootout, there's no, like, we talked our way out of a situation. It was just a conversation that they were not really impressed with the Enterprise. Like, well, we can't blame you for what, because your bases are blown up and our bases are blown up. But just you know, chill out and stay out of our area, just stay out of our face, and we're gonna move on.
Yeah, they were very like,
Picard's,
I don't like you.
Yeah, totally. Picard just
but we're back.
Like, Picard's just like, this is just gonna be an interesting journey, you know, and that's telling the audience like there's heavier things to come. And we haven't even been introduced to the Borg yet, and their first introduction is the exact same thing as like where Q's just like, look, you are not prepared like you think you are.
Oh yeah.
And it's such a good
right. Freaking Q.
Yeah. But they're just so it's just such a good, here's a little flavor of these different species, here's a few connections. We already had a pretty major death on the crew, and then Picard's just at the end, he's like, there's some big stuff out there. This is gonna be a very interesting adventure coming ahead. And then in the audience, you're just like, and I couldn't wait to go on the next episode, but I couldn't wait to do this video. But it's good. It's drier. It's slower. There's some action, but you can see the budget limitations. It's kind of like watching the early episodes of Game of Thrones, where like the action scenes were kind of paced out, where they just kind of need them here and there to kind of keep the excitement, the energy up, but like they were used more tactfully instead of just casually. And current new Star Trek shows is just action. Yeah. This one's a lot more about the diplomacy and the characters than a lot of them are later on. They spend a lot more time, whereas that's why people think Star Trek is boring or slow, is for that exact reason.
Yeah, they're always lessons. You know what I mean? they're always there to teach you something. And yes, oftentimes they're very slow, or as my little one says, you know, they just talk in some of those, and some
Right.
of them they do. But as an adult, you know, you relate more and more. I feel like every time you watch it, there's some other glimpse into our potential, you know, in there.
It's the ethics. And I remember watching as a kid because my mom watched it, and mostly because it was on, and I didn't have my own devices like kids do, where I could go do my own thing.
Right.
She's watching it. I was in the room being exposed to it. You know, I was absorbed through osmosis.
There is one TV. This is what's on.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I remembered some of the stuff, some of the characters, some of the lines, some of the scenes a little bit here and there, but all of the conversations and the ethics that are actually being taught and presented, the controversies, I didn't have any grasp of any of that. And now watching as an adult, you see that and you're like, I can see the dilemma. How do you get Wesley safe when it's like your head doctor and friend's son, who, by the way, you were an aspect of the death of his father. How do you get him off without breaking the regulations of Starfleet and betraying your position? You know, how do you weigh the lives of the saucer versus the lives on the planet? Just different things. You're like, all this, it's interesting. It's really cool. And that they put them to that test, even the Starfleet episode with where Wesley didn't get in as an ensign. That's that with the test that they do. Again, that's really interesting. The one guy cheated, and he was like, I shouldn't win. It should be Wesley because he's the one that helped me. You know, there's a lot of good things about characters and decision making, and there's a lot of things about politics and reflecting where we were and where we are now. Like you said, as a kid, you don't appreciate that. You're just looking for action. So current shows, it's all about the action, and it's fun, it's cool stuff, and there's some good action, but while their sets are really hokey compared, and especially in 4K, and you're watching on an HDTV, you see the plastic, you can see the rubber, you can see all that. But the costumes are awesome. I love the aliens. I love the creativity. I love the dialogue, and I love the setup for where it goes from here. It's just really good, really good. I can see it, and it's not like I've been surprised. Like, I didn't realize this was good. I always knew it was good. It's just I want to go through and watch the whole thing for once. I've seen many episodes, multiple times. And I know the gist of where it all goes, but this is exciting for me to watch this. So I look forward to talking with you, Kirsten, so I can be excited and talk to someone. And I don't care about.
I don't know. We're past my favorite episode already. It's like downhill from here.
Which was your favorite?
So I really like Angel 1.
Which one's that? Which one's that?
It's the one with the women in charge on the planet. The guys have been stranded for 7 years or something.
Let's see. You remind me. So they're on the planet. They're in charge. That's one where Riker is with that woman.
He has to wear that outfit.
Yeah. You know what? That one I couldn't follow though because
they dress him up. And he's got a giant codpiece thing.
Yeah. And Deanna and
Tasha
are just like,
yeah. I love that. Troy's like, here he comes, and she's like,
yeah. That was fun, like, you know, girl bonding episode too. I did like that. I just that one though I had a hard time following. You know, there was that where the first in command was out with the people that were hidden in the wilderness or whatever. That was that episode, right? Where
yes.
So it was just.
They were like, at first it was a dream. There's this planet with this Amazonian women. And then they're like, wait, we don't have any rights here. And I'm like, yeah, take that, suckers. No pockets either, buddy.
Yeah. It was fun. Yeah, that had some interesting ethics and some controversy in there. And again, that was, 25 years ago or 30 years ago, whatever.
And it's trying to point out stuff that here we are,
Yep.
Yeah. I still don't have pockets, Tim.
You still have pockets? Well, shame on you. Anyway, I'm excited to see where it goes from here because Next Generation is a lot of fun, great characters, and now we have the setup, and so now we can see them start going into getting more color and more fruition in their stories. Here's what I know. Picard doesn't like kids. Data starts playing with emotion chips, gets a cat, becomes friends with Data, plays poker, plays Sherlock Holmes. Riker grows a beard and flirts a lot, and he hooks up with that one hot chick with the weird thing on her nose for her species. Troy starts wearing a uniform later. She gets the blue uniform that she wears more regularly. Beverly leaves and comes back. Will goes to Starfleet. Worf gets a new bandolier and gets a green shirt. Gets his son, meets his wife, and stuff. And Troy's mom comes back and is just hilarious.
Oh, that's right.
That's my synopsis of the rest of the Star Trek.
No,
Yep.
you didn't even need Locutus of.
Yeah, all that. Oh yeah, the Borg. I guess all the main story is that. I forgot. Picard turns into a Borg, comes back. I don't remember that, but can I tell you what my favorite episode is? This probably won't surprise you. This is like kind of a more Star Wars-y one. But the one where they come on that planet, I think it's next season, I don't remember. But where they come on that planet where they have the prisoner escape and he completely evades the ship and he like gets around, he goes behind the moon and they get on the moon, they finally grab his like a shuttle or whatever, and he fights off like 4 guys. He's this perfectly trained soldier. And he like gets in the air ducts and they're like spending the first 50 minutes just trying to capture him. And he was wanted and he was breaking away from the planet. And then they go down and he was trying to create a revolution. Do you have any idea what episode I'm talking about?
I vaguely remember this. Yeah.
Awesome. And then he hits on Troy, and I don't like that because I don't like anyone messing with Troy because you don't hit on Troy. Troy's already spoken for, and if not by me, it's by Riker. But anyway, that's my favorite episode. I think it's next season, but it's really cool. Maybe not. Maybe it's later down.
I forgot how much of season 1 really was enjoyable. Getting back into these, I thought, oh, this is the roughest season, but it really has a lot of good rewatch value. I wasn't expecting that. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure by comparison, people would say it's slower. I'm sure that's what you're talking about, but it's not boring. I was never like, oh, I have to keep watching these. I think the next season has some of the boringer episodes from what I remember from trying this a few years ago. I only got to like maybe season 3 a few years ago. This was like 5 years ago. Anyway, excited to do it. Excited to talk about it. Kirsten, any other final thoughts on the first season?
No, I really enjoyed it. So thank you for giving me an excuse to rewatch that again.
I appreciate your commitment. I appreciate you showing up in uniform. Very professional. All right. Well, thanks for watching. And if you have any thoughts on Star Trek, let us know. But this is 30, plus years old or whatever. So I don't think anyone really cares anymore. But Kirsten and I. So whatever. Go watch Picard because that's what's hot right now. And we'll get there someday. Right, so hot. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time on Saints on Cinema. And thanks again, Kirsten. You're the best.